What are the biggest rivalries in sport, and where does South Africa versus New Zealand in rugby rank? I think you'd have to say it's right up there. The reality for the rest of the rugby world is that this is, to be honest, the only show in town, and it has been for, well, it's been 20 years since a team besides New Zealand or South Africa lifted a Rugby World Cup, and we've got at least 4 more years to wait for the next. This is the big two. South Africa versus New Zealand. This is the one the fans of those two nations look for. This is 2 of the countries on earth where rugby is the national sport. Not many can say that. And there's few countries that are going to just come to a grinding halt in the way that these 2 countries will on Saturday night when they go head to head for the ultimate bragging rights and being the first nation to win 4 Rugby World Cups. Let's get right stuck into the meat of this matchup on this video. I'm Tim, this is Egg Chasers. Give the video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing and it really helps spread the word. It's just me talking about rugby, and it helps spread the word and helps spread the channel. Thank you very much for hopping on board with the channel, and if I haven't already earned your subscription, I hope maybe I will on this video. I've shaken off any remaining disappointment from the semi-final, and I'm fully focused on what should be a fantastic week. I'm going to be back in Paris in a couple of days when the teams are announced for the 3rd, 4th place playoff, which meh. And I'll be there for the World Cup final. Get in. That's the big one. I'm currently spending a couple of days. I went from Paris to, this is my favourite part of the world, the Peloponnese in Greece. I've been coming here, a little area called the Marni. I've been coming here since I was 10, and I love the fact I can bring my kids here now. And so it's great to get a couple of days after 6 weeks of travelling in a camper van for the Rugby World Cup. Yeah. A few days on the beach and then back to it for the rugby, but I'm thinking about rugby constantly, if I'm perfectly honest, and let's look at the facts. In terms of rivalries, yeah, I'd love to know actually, what are the biggest rivalries in sport generally? I think this has to be a contender, doesn't it? Obviously Australia would love to think, you know, they're a big rival of New Zealand, and yes, that's true, but Australia haven't been a real rugby powerhouse for quite some time. England against these 2 sides, yeah, that's a big rivalry because of the colonial past, and it must be great for the colonial settlements to be able to stick it to the colonisers who gave them the game, and now they're better at it than the people who invented the sport in the first place. There is a rivalry brewing between Ireland and New Zealand. That's been a bit spicy lately. Hopefully that can continue. But you can't look past that 20 years of domination, 3 World Cups each. New Zealand, though, the only side to have won back-to-back World Cups, something they like to remind South African fans of. South Africa have the chance to do that on this occasion. And if they do, I think there's a massive debate to be had about what's the greatest rugby side of all time. Is it New Zealand of 2011-15, or is it this South Africa side currently? I think that's a really interesting debate, one that maybe we'll be having next week. I'm sure New Zealand will have something to say about that. And of course, the one thing South Africa always point to is they weren't involved in the first 2 World Cups. So they've had 2 fewer opportunities. And were they to win this weekend, they will have won half of the World Cups in which they've entered, which would be an absolutely astonishing hit rate. So New Zealand breezed through to this stage in terms of the semi-final, at least. They did not breeze through their quarter-final. That performance against Ireland was a statement performance. It was a marker in the ground, and it showed exactly what this New Zealand side is capable of. It was the best that they've performed in a long, long time. And when you think about the context that Ian Foster, Sam Cane, this New Zealand side in general, there were debates being had, is this the worst New Zealand side ever? And they could be world champions. Equally, South Africa, heavily fancied in that semi-final, came through in the end, but by the skin of their teeth. But they showed that resolve, which has been an absolute cornerstone of the side, and the scrummaging ability, which is another cornerstone of the side. I don't think South Africa will let whatever happened between the quarter-final against France and the semi-final against England. England were capable, and any team, this is a good lesson just for rugby in general, any team is capable of getting themselves in the right emotional place to produce one big performance. To win a World Cup, you've got to back up big performance after big performance. Does the fact New Zealand have kind of had an easy run, does that give them an advantage this weekend? You'd have to think, bearing in mind how tough it was for South Africa to back up France against England, maybe does give them an advantage. But then on the flip side, maybe South Africa, having used their get out of jail free card in the form of Oxenche, and well, their bench in general, you kind of think that whatever mistake they made in their preparation, they won't make again. They're too experienced and too wily to do that. So I think this is going to be an absolutely epic matchup. And what factors could there be? Well, the weather is one. Unlike here where I am in Greece, where it's just ridiculous. It's beautiful. It's not going to be that way in Paris, is it? There's a very good chance we have rain on Saturday night. Who does that favour? Well, you'd have to say that that favours South Africa. They've evolved their game over the years, but those set-piece fundamentals are absolutely massive. And if there's rain in the air, that's going to make, well, you would imagine more handling errors, more scrums, advantage New Zealand, advantage South Africa, I beg your pardon. Another factor is the referee. And Wayne Barnes is the best referee in the world. He has been for a long time. I know there's been games where either New Zealand or South Africa may have felt hard done by. Thinking back to, what was it, Peter Steph de Toy's red card in that game against France in Marseille a year ago. But this isn't just English bias. He is the best referee in the world. He is head and shoulders above any other referee. And he allows the teams to play the way that they want to play. That's the best thing about Wayne Barnes. So there are some referees where I think, oh, that's going to favour a team that wants a loose breakdown, or that's, if it was Matthew Carley, for example, no criticism of Matthew Carley, but if it was Matthew Carley, I'd think that's big news for South Africa because he's very technical and picky, and that might result in more scrums and infringements and line-outs and things. Wayne Barnes will let it flow, and that will help New Zealand, but he won't miss things, generally speaking. He'll be on it, so you could say that favours South Africa. So I think it's the best possible person to be leading this. I will say Northern Hemisphere referees generally are a little bit tighter at the breakdown than their Southern Hemisphere compatriots, which means, well, when Southern Hemisphere refs play, I think the ball tends to be a little bit quicker. Wayne Barnes, if there's anyone, Wayne Barnes will make sure the ball is a little bit quicker because he won't allow people lying on the ball like quite often Southern Hemisphere referees tend to do. They're a little bit looser with where people are in the breakdown. And we definitely saw that with Ben O'Keefe. And that's not me complaining about Ben O'Keefe. I think he got the big calls right. I'm not complaining, but he allows the breakdowns to be a little bit of a bun fight, and Wayne Barnes will not allow that. So I would say that's good news for New Zealand. So weather, good news for South Africa. Referee, probably if you had to pick, better news for New Zealand. Recent history, well, it was an absolute, well, it's kind of not quite one-way traffic, but not far off it in the opening game of the Rugby Championship. When, by the way, I got reminded, thank you very much for the people that have commented in the channel, do leave your comments, who said, Tim, fair play, you called this one back in July. When, before the first Rugby Championship game, there's a video in the channel, please go and have a look at it, where I say, mark my words, this is a rehearsal for a World Cup final. I called it. I mean, I've said some other things which have been completely wrong, but I'll take that one. I'll take it. I'll absolutely take it. I did also say another thing. I said before the quarter-final, how did New Zealand beat Ireland was the question, and I said it's by their varied short-range kicking game, which absolutely was a massive part of that win, and I think it's something New Zealand will replicate against South Africa. But that opening Rugby Championship win for New Zealand was a statement performance in itself. Caught South Africa a little bit cold, short range, varied kicking options, worked really well, and they matched them physically in the front five. And another thing I said before the World Cup, in fact maybe back in June, was this could be a World Cup where Ethan de Groot and Tyrell Lomax overtake Frans Malherbe and Stephen Kitsoff as the premier props in the world. I think it could well be the case that by full time on Saturday, we are saying, wow, de Groot and Lomax are better than Malherbe and Kitsoff. However, the big thing that I didn't anticipate was it might not matter who the starting props are. It might matter who New Zealand's finishing props are. Because Oxenche right now looks like the most valuable man in rugby. He absolutely destroyed France on his own. He destroyed England on his own, and could he make it a hat-trick? But of course, in terms of previous matchups, you have to look at that game at Twickenham, where it was, I mean, that's where people started to put New Zealand under the radar. Of course, they then went a week later, lost to France, but getting absolutely panned by South Africa and physically dominated just meant a lot of people sort of thought that, well, it's just the top three in the world, Ireland, France, South Africa, and New Zealand are kind of a little gap below. In hindsight, you wonder, well, was it the fact that New Zealand were fresh off the plane after a long journey from New Zealand into London? And secondly, was New Zealand's training programme loading them heavily so that maybe there was a bit more fatigue in their legs than there is come this quarter-final, semi-final, final time? I think that may well be the case. So I don't see a repeat of either of these games happening. I don't see a repeat of either. I think this is going to be tight. I think this is going to be tense. I think tries, whilst both teams are capable of scoring plenty of tries, I don't think there's going to be many of them. And I think it could come down to kicking and set piece. And just maybe the ability to have a moment where when you get the opportunity, you take it. That's finals rugby all over, isn't it? They've both got rapid wings, incredibly skillful backs, big and skillful centres, classy halfbacks, world-class locks. Matchups like PSDT and Frizzell is huge. There's matchups all over the park. I think this one is too close to call. If I'm thinking about what I saw last weekend and the impact of a nice light week, a light matchup for New Zealand against Argentina, who really were just happy to be there, played really badly, then I'm thinking it might be advantage New Zealand. But then I think New Zealand have got are New Zealand better man for man? This is it. When the teams are announced, I'll do my combined team, and that's going to be almost impossible. Yeah, every single angle that you look at this from, it looks too close to call, and that is what you want. And for all of the talk about a lopsided draw, for all of the talk about things being unfair, pools of death and stuff, can we just reflect on the fact that out of the knockout stages so far, what have there been? 2 semi-finals and 4 quarter-finals. All 4 of the quarter-finals were incredible, and one of the semi-finals was incredible. We have been absolutely treated, and it doesn't matter what side of the draw you're on. It doesn't matter what pool you were in. These two teams would always have met in the final, because you have to beat the best to be the best. And these two teams are the 2 best teams on earth. They've peaked at the right time. They've used World Cup pedigree, whether it's confidence that's just in their bones from growing up and seeing teams on the telly always dominating. There's got to be something culturally in these teams. The fact that they are rugby mad nations that play rugby first means their pool of talent is deep and it's rich. Young New Zealanders grow up with a rugby ball in their hand. Young South Africans grow up massive, eating loads of meat. I cannot wait for this one. It's too close to call. Head says South Africa, just. But then I can't look past the toll that the semi-final might have taken on them. History is beckoning for one of these teams. Which one is it going to be? When we see the teams, we'll get a little bit more sense. But tell me where you think the big matchups are. Tell me where you think the important areas in this game are, and maybe we can discuss a little bit further, because as you can see, as you will have seen if you subscribe and you get stuck in with the channel, I do get right in there with you in the comments, and quite often comments that get made lead to the content that you see here on Egg Chasers. I'm Tim, nice one for watching. I'll see you on the next video.